Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are stepping into this really quiet, almost sterile world of high-rise corporate life. We're talking about the 47th floor, a place where the air feels thin and pressure is just constant. We're going to unpack some source material that centers on four executives trying to navigate this whole environment. It starts with a guy named Marcus Ashford. He's looking out over the city and sort of wrestling with this idea that all barriers are also connections.
Yeah, and this material is so fascinating because it uses that high-stakes world of executive strategy as a lens to look at personal integrity. It's a really deep look into the lives of Marcus, Catherine Reeves, Thomas Cordell, and Elena Vasquez. And it shows how professional ambition, when you take it to its absolute extreme, starts to rewrite all the rules of your personal life.
Right. So our mission for this deep dive is to get a really nuanced look at how that kind of environment just messes with your integrity, your relationships. We're unpacking these, sometimes pretty radical philosophies these characters have about loyalty, guilt, all of it, and really trying to figure out the huge cost when your work-life strategy just takes over your inner life.
And we dive right in with a classic corporate betrayal. It focuses on Marcus. He was gearing up for this massive presentation, putting in a huge effort. The source material notes he prepared with the kind of thoroughness that borders on superstition.
Yeah.
He's treating it like a ritual, not just about being competent.
It's like he believed that if he just did the work perfectly, did everything right, then the results would have to follow. But, competence alone isn't going to save you on the 47th floor, is it?
Not at all, no. Because his boss, Catherine Reeves, who's overseeing this whole thing, she's already way past that kind of logic.
Yeah.
For her, the decision to take this account from Marcus was, and this is a quote, merely the ceremonial unfolding of a verdict long since passed. The game was decided long before he even stepped in the room.
That is just chillingly cold, especially when you consider the history between them. The sources talk about an affair between Marcus and Catherine, which, it devolved pretty quickly. It became merely another set of routines. So it went from passion to something calculated, almost like a business arrangement.
And what's really fascinating here is Catherine's philosophy defending that kind of behavior. She didn't believe in guilt. She argued that feeling guilty was just confusing social convention with moral reality.
So she's basically saying that if she has to do something ruthless for her job, feeling bad about it is just unnecessary baggage from society.
Exactly. It's a cognitive burden. And if you remove the guilt, you remove hesitation.
And hesitation is a liability in that world.
It's a huge liability. So
Yeah.
it is self-serving for sure, but it also makes her incredibly effective. The way Marcus was undermined was just as clinical. The account goes to this other guy, Thomas Cordell. He didn't attack Marcus head-on. He used faint praise and agreement delivered with subtle hesitation.
Oh, that is insidious. That's so hard to defend against. So when Catherine finally drops the hammer and uses that classic line, "It wasn't personal," that's when it all clicks for Marcus.
Yes. The material says Marcus almost laughed. At the absurdity of it. He realizes that the belief that you can separate business from the personal is itself a personal philosophy, a choice about what to value and what to sacrifice. And that realization just came way too late for him.
Absolutely. The organization needs you to believe in that split, but the individual always pays the price. So if we pivot from that betrayal to the philosophies that made it possible, we see these two really dominant worldviews. You have Catherine's radical self-interest and then Elena's sharp observational pragmatism.
Let's stick with Catherine for a second. She's a master of this environment. She claims she never planned anything. Not really. She just responded to circumstances, always grabbing the best opportunity. It's a very fluid, almost reactive strategy.
She seems unstoppable on the surface, but the sources point to this deep vulnerability. Her greatest fear was disappearing, becoming so identified with her job that there would be nothing left of her beyond the role.
She mastered the system, but the system also mastered her. It demanded everything, her time, her thoughts, her identity. And that idea that she might just be her job title is terrifying for someone who values control above everything else.
Which leads us perfectly to Elena Vasquez, who seems to have figured out that the role is everything. She wasn't an operator like Catherine, she was more of an observer. She saw professional life as the careful calibration of visibility and invisibility.
Right. You have to be seen doing the right things, but you have to be totally invisible when things go wrong.
Exactly. And she drops this critical insight that success, it doesn't often go to the most competent person. It goes to those most willing to pretend that these unwritten rules didn't exist, even while following them exactly.
It's all a performance. The performance of being an oblivious, hardworking professional is what gets you ahead.
That's such a damning indictment of the whole professional world, isn't it? She's basically saying the work is secondary to playing the game. She even argues that awkwardness was the natural state of human interaction, which suggests all the smooth corporate interactions they have are completely artificial.
And if every interaction is strategic, every relationship optimized for gain, it leads to this terrible question that Marcus eventually asks Catherine. He says, maybe love is nothing more than the temporary alignment of interests. And all the mythology we build around it is just there to disguise the fundamentally transactional nature of all relationships.
That is the ultimate cynical take, born from years of that kind of strategic thinking. If you treat people like assets at work, how do you just turn that off at home?
You can't. And speaking of calculations going wrong, this whole philosophy just slams into a wall when we get back to Thomas Cordell, the guy who undermined Marcus to get the big account.
Right. So Thomas gets the Henderson account, and this thing is massive, like a third of the company's Q4 revenue, and he is completely out of his depth. Elena and Marcus pretty quickly figure out that his projections are overly optimistic.
Built on assumptions that are just unlikely to materialize.
So the political operator turns out to be technically incompetent.
Yes. And this is where Catherine shows her true genius, not as an executive, but as a master of narrative control.
So when the whole thing starts to fall apart, she immediately sweeps in to manage the fallout. She frames the review not as a response to Thomas's failure, but as her own proactive strategic initiative. So clever.
And then comes the killer political move. When she's talking to Thomas privately about his mistakes, she just casually offers him this lifeline. She asks him how much he had to rely on Marcus's initial models.
So she's giving him an out, a way to spread the blame backwards. She's suggesting that Marcus's initial models had been rough, which protects Thomas, and more importantly, protects the firm's narrative.
Thomas takes it, of course. And he feels simultaneously grateful and disgusted. That one moment just perfectly shows how institutions create scapegoats. Self-preservation beats competence every single time.
Which leads Elena to warn Marcus that, in this kind of place, truth was a poor strategy. She clarifies that institutional truth is just whatever narrative had the most powerful sponsors.
And Marcus has this huge moment of clarity. He finally gets his biggest professional mistake. He confused should and is. He operated like the system should reward integrity, when the reality is that power and narrative are what matter.
Meanwhile, Thomas is just completely falling apart. His initial measured enthusiasm is gone, replaced by crippling anxiety. He realizes his whole professional persona was a costume that had become uncomfortable.
The success he chased and what he sacrificed to get it is now suffocating him, literally.
And for Marcus, that unraveling is sped up by something from outside that world. His father gets diagnosed with Alzheimer's. It introduces the stark reality of mortality and decline into a world that's obsessed with constant growth and optimization.
Right. And it forces him to look at his own life and ask, was all my professional achievement just repeating my father's sacrifice and compromise, but in a fancier suit?
That pressure starts to change his relationship with Elena. Their connection grows slowly, non-strategically. They stop talking about work and start discussing philosophy and literature and the strange anxiety of contemporary existence.
It's the first real, authentic connection he's had in years. It's built on curiosity, not on mutual gain.
And it's Elena who finally puts words to the trap they're both in. She confesses that strategic thinking is so deep in her bones that she feels like she's watching her own life from outside, like a character in a play.
And this is the turning point where Marcus finally understands the deeper problem. He suggests that rationality taken to its extreme became its own form of pathology, became a prison of calculation.
They optimized themselves into a system that was basically toxic to the human spirit.
And that realization gives Elena the courage to make a huge choice. She leaves the firm, goes to a smaller company doing more interesting work. She picks alignment over stability. And she calls Marcus out. She tells him he's trapped by his inability to imagine alternatives. He's confusing what's inevitable with what's just familiar.
She's saying his ambition isn't a destiny, it's just a habit. Their last moments before she leaves are marked by this huge change. They decide to stop protecting and start allowing, just opting for real vulnerability over strategic control.
So let's look at the aftermath for everyone.
Yeah.
The transformations are pretty radical. Thomas, the guy who unraveled the most, he finally leaves the firm. He goes to therapy, starts painting again. He works on rebuilding an honest relationship with his wife, realizing regret was the worst thing.
And even Catherine, the ultimate strategist, ends up out. She leaves for a nonprofit. She admits later that all her achievements had felt hollow. The irony is she only found herself after she let go of the job title that defined her.
And Elena, she finds success, but on her own terms. She publishes her novel. And interestingly, it's a novel that resists a neat resolution. It leaves readers with questions, reflecting the ambiguity of life that the corporate world tries so hard to eliminate.
As for Marcus and Elena, they do get together. They move in together. And crucially, their commitment isn't defined by passion or romance, but by mutual respect and shared values and willingness to do the work.
Love becomes a decision to invest in another person's well-being. It's a complete rejection of that transactional model he used to fear.
And the final philosophical shift for Marcus comes after his father passes away. Facing that mortality head-on, he starts to value process over outcomes. He learns to accept uncertainty.
Elena captures this perfectly. She says the goal isn't making things permanent. It's to fully inhabit their impermanence, to love things precisely because they wouldn't last. It's the ultimate anti-strategy.
And that brings us to his final choice. Catherine, who never stops playing the game, calls him up and offers him a huge promotion. And he says no. He declines. He chooses uncertainty. He realizes that his willingness to sit with uncertainty was actually more valuable than the rush to premature resolution.
Yeah. He finally stopped confusing what was familiar with what was inevitable.
So what this whole deep dive reveals is this deep paradox in any ambitious environment, right? The systems that are designed to reward competence and control, they also demand you sacrifice your integrity, your vulnerability.
Exactly. The real cost of that constant self-preservation, of all that strategy, is just isolation and a lack of authenticity.
And it really makes you wonder about how hard it is to unlearn those habits. I mean, we saw Thomas basically had to go through a kind of professional death, dismantle his entire identity just to start living for real.
Which leaves a pretty provocative thought. If you're someone who is dedicated to optimization and control in your own life, if you've built your success on that kind of calculated efficiency, what happens when that very dedication becomes the barrier, the thing that stops you from having a genuine connection? You have to ask yourself, is your rationality, the system you trust the most, actually a prison of calculation that's keeping you from what really matters?